Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Lead Network here on Thursday, March 9th. It is 10:45, and we're going to get started. As you'll recognize, Bob Madison is not with us here today. He is managing the high school league hockey tournament down at the XL Center, and so he'll be coming back to us next time that we have Lead. I know that's a little bit different, but ultimately the information is going to be shared, and we appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this live or also to log in online and take a look at the information that's provided within the Lead Network. We'll get started, and while we wish that maybe the snow wasn't falling and that there was sunshine and grass was starting to show through, we're in a unique situation in March where we are still in the midst of wrapping up winter state tournaments, and we're also preparing for spring. And so you see both of those items on the agenda. One of the major topics here at the league is addressing classification and competitive section placement. We'll take a bit of time there to walk through some of the information that's important for you to know and understand relative to competitive section placement. Hope that folks have had a chance to watch the video that Bob shared out through the high school league earlier. And we'll also talk a little bit about foundation and some key points that you want to take note of with quick takes and checklists as we get started. So thanks again for being with us, and we'll move forward to the next slide, and Phil Archer will take us through some information relative to winter tournaments.
Good deal. Thanks, Eric, and welcome everybody to today's lead. Winter postseason tournament. So obviously acknowledging that many teams and schools have already kind of wrapped up their winter season, addressing some things around winter tournaments to help these last handful of tournaments flow and go smooth, and also share a thank you and a voice of appreciation from the league and all the people that are supporting the tournament. So, as we work in navigating the postseason, many of you have either hosted or assisted in state tournaments, and we want to make sure that we are appreciated. You know that you're appreciated, and we value your contribution. So a couple of bullet points here. So in hosting our postseason contest, we want to make sure that there's consistency between the section aspects and the state tournament aspects. And these could be little things right down to having the right number of coaches or coaches on your bench that align with that of the state tournament, or in maintaining that high standard on the side of spectator behavior and admins work with that. So also in attending online meetings, as well as like the qualifiers and participants meetings for the different things, there's going to be a lot of communication in those meetings relayed for coaches, for community members, and your ability to relay that information to your communities makes for a better tournament experience overall for players, fans, and your schools, communities. So and we hop into the attention to detail and the requirements bullet point. Just going with, lost track of my notes here. Working with, as ADs, working with your coaches, because we all know that they can push boundaries at times, and we want to make sure that our coaches and staff are putting the correct information in front of the league, and also in doing so, making sure that we're exercising the highest levels of integrity when doing so. And so as ADs, checking in and making sure that the information on our coaches is up to date, CERs are good, that the correct coaches are there, student managers there if possible, things along those lines. And so, and then lastly, working with your communities and your students, communicating with them and keeping them in the flow of information of what's needed to be known, what's expected, and that makes for a better experience for everyone that's involved with it. So, and then lastly here, I would like to encourage you to continue to share positive experiences on social media. These provide great energy, and it brings excitement around the tournament. So I feel that the more that we work together on all of these different aspects, the more everyone benefits, and it really truly does benefit everyone from the tournament experience as a whole overall. So and we just want to say thank you and know that your presence has been seen and appreciated, and it's valuable. So with that, I'll pass it back to Eric, because I know many of you want to get into the competitive section placement, which has been the huge topic that's been around the league for the last couple of months.
Thanks so much, Phil. And I just want to echo that appreciation to all of our schools who have done incredible work, and especially our regions as well. We've had a number of schools that have reached out and said, we're anticipating maybe a challenge here or a challenge there, and we want to make sure we're doing this right and walking that through. Really good preparation and ultimately excellent administration going forward. And we know that the lights get a little bit brighter and the reach of our experiences get greater when we get to the tournament side of things. But we'll step into classification and competitive section placement. This is a significant process, and Minnesota is rather unique in the extent to which we work to try to create equitable classifications for our schools. Many states will simply rank schools by their raw enrollment, and they will count down number of schools, they will draw lines, and that is where you play. We go much further than that. We take a look at a lot of different factors. We give schools some options that other states don't allow. And so it's a significant process. We rely directly on the data from the Minnesota Department of Ed. And so because of that, we hold our processes until we get that information. This year, that was a couple of weeks later than typical. And so while we had a planned schedule for when we were going to do things, we had to adjust slightly, but not a great deal. Ultimately, the end time is not going to change. We moved our time for appeals to back a couple of days to March 6th. Next week, our AD advisory committee, as well as our executive committee off of our board of directors, are going to be engaged in reviewing and recommending appeals to be approved, and then ultimately having the executive committee review those recommendations and approve those so that we can continue forward. So as we go to the next slide, you'll see that we'll step into some of the detail that are part of this, and I think we've got that covered. So here is where you're going to find the information that you need relative to classification and competitive section placement. On your AD dashboard, it only lives with you. It is not part of the coaches dashboard or other groups. So you have unique access to these classification, the listing of where the cut lines are, et cetera. And so want to make sure that you have that well understood, and that when there is information needed, you are the go-to for your school, your coaches, et cetera, and you're the one who has access. We'll step forward from there and do just a little bit of review how we get to where we're going. Again, we base all of our calculations based on information that comes from the Department of Ed. Raw data is provided to us both in total enrollment as well as the number of students that qualify for free and reduced. Minnesota and now Iowa have approved a model whereby 40% of your free and reduced population is reduced from your raw enrollment to find your high school league enrollment. An example down below, just a quick math problem. If you had 500 students and 100 of those qualified for free and reduced, 40% of those 100 would be 40 students. And so your high school league enrollment would be 460. And you can do those calculations. We've had schools that have called in, and we've compared the data that we have coming straight from MDE with what they have, and we have found it to be spot on in a match with that. So you can double check that, make sure it's where it should be, but we are moving ahead using the numbers that have come in. So as we take those numbers and we go a little bit further with it, we recognize that some things have started to emerge. And so we've seen some data trends this year that are a little bit unique to where we've been. Statewide, the 9-12 free and reduced enrollment is up 37%. Talk a little bit more about how that happened, but what you would recognize then is if your free and reduced population goes up, that would mean that your MSHSL enrollment would go down with greater number of students. Again, a typical math analysis would be if 2 years ago you had 100 students on free and reduced, you might be somewhere in the 135, 140 range. And that's going to increase the number of students that are going to be deducted from your raw enrollment. So one of the aspects that's taking place this year at the Department of Ed is through the MARS reporting. And that is determining students who qualify for free and reduced. MDE has implemented direct certification for free and reduced lunch through programs like SNAP and the Minnesota Family Investment Program, MFIP, Medicaid, et cetera. And up to 90% of the qualifiers in our member schools are automatically certified through these processes. They don't require application to make up those numbers. There still is an application for all families to fill out because they may not qualify or may not be connected to even apply for some of these other programs that are out there that would have direct connections. But in our experience, we've seen that only about 10% of the students who qualify for free and reduced lunch wouldn't already be part of the direct certification. So if you compare what we see on the bottom there with direct certification for free and reduced, and we compare it up above, we can understand why free and reduced lunch across the state has increased. We have a greater system to be able to identify those students. It is also more consistent for our schools, perhaps, than it has been in the past because of these direct connections. And so we think that this assists us in having even better data, more accurate data. However, what we do see is that those high school league enrollments most typically have dropped a bit from where they were in 2021. What does that mean for you? You may recognize when you saw what your enrollment was that it could be a bit lower. And so thoughts were we might drop out of a class to a different class or things like that, only to find that others around you in terms of ranking or their free and reduced populations also have dropped down in their high school league enrollment. And overall, we've seen our cut lines go down just a little bit as we've taken a look at this process. As we move to the next slide, you'll see additional information here, which talks about those cutoffs and how do they apply to you as a school. So again, each one of our sports or activities has a process by which classes are determined. Some might be a 2-class system, a 3-class system, 4-class system. And again, within our policies, there are acceptable ways for classes to be created. And so most recently, last week, we published the cutoff lines for our team sports and activities where appeals are allowed. Basically, what it is if an activity or sport has an individual competitive aspect to it, those are not going to be appealable. Those that are team sports only, and you see that list there, they qualify for appeals. And the reason that we did those first is because we had a timeline to have you submit appeals by the 6th, which was this past Monday. And so our classification enrollment cutoffs for the remainder of sports and activities are intended to be published later today through the high school league update. There will be an article there with a link to be able to see what that new document looks like that has all of the ones that we published last week, as well as the rest of our activities in sports, including where those cutoff lines are. Again, using your high school league enrollment, you'll be able to identify where do we qualify and what class are we going to be competing in as we go forward. So taking a step forward on the slides here, we see that as we look at this, this is the example. And again, what do these numbers mean? Well, I think you can read pretty well if we just take a look at baseball, and softball is going to be quite similar to baseball, that it indicates what is the range of the populations of our high school league enrollment that fit within each of these classes. Each one of these numbers represents an actual school enrollment. And so when we count down 64 teams or 96 teams or 128 teams, that's going to land somewhere, and that's going to be that defined number for that particular sport. We may end up with more than 64 or 96 or 128 teams if there is a tie at the 64th team. And so we might have 65 or 66 because there are ties. So just recognize that. And that number, like I said, does correlate with one specific school or team or more than one, depending on what that situation happens to be. So as you look at those cut lines, again, just be careful and make sure you've got, kind of the right enrollment in mind and look for your classification. Taking a step ahead, one of the biggest parts that makes Minnesota unique is our opt-up option, as well as appealing for a lower class. And we put these side by side for a comparative because oftentimes in common language, we get these mixed up just a little bit. Opting up means that your team is choosing to identify a class in which it wants to participate that is likely at a higher class in terms of enrollment than where it might otherwise be placed. Opt-ups are available in all sports and activities, and obviously if you're already in the biggest class, there's nowhere to go, but you can opt up whether if you choose to for your particular team, for whatever reason that might be conference alignment. Everybody's in that class already. It makes sense for us to be there. Other aspects that might be involved. All of the opt-ups are approved. And then this key point is really helpful for folks. Our opt-ups happen prior to the determining of our cutoff lines. And so with that, what that means is we take a look at a ranked list of all the teams in sport, and those that choose to opt up are moved to the top of that particular class, and then they would be involved in the counting of however many teams go into that particular class. So we might have 4 teams that opted up in our top 64, so we would take the next 60 teams to be able to get to 64. That's different when we move over on the appeals side. First of all, appeals need to meet the criteria to be able to appeal, has to be within a sport where appeals are allowed. And then those appeals are going to be reviewed and recommended by the AD advisory group next week and ultimately approved by the executive committee of the board based on the recommendations and the supporting information that comes with it. Cutoff numbers are already determined in those sports. So if an appeal is granted, that is going to change the number of teams in a class. Where opt-ups should not change what's predetermined, appeals would make a difference. So you might have 2 or 3 teams that move out of a particular class and drop to a class that has lower enrollments than where they currently are. So it's some good comparison. If you need to come back to recognize what that is, opt-ups versus appeals, and helping with understanding our language and how we talk about those, I think this slide is really, really valuable. One more piece to recognize, and this is for schools and teams who have submitted appeals. To be able to appeal, again, those rules are that you must have 50% free and reduced lunch or greater, and or have an enrollment that falls within 10% of the cutoff line for that particular class within the sport that you're looking at. And so once you do qualify, then here's a list of things that are part of the application that are scored in a rubric to help us identify whether or not that appeal is going to be granted. And so as you take a look at those, what you see is that we try to get the best picture of the program that we're talking about, how successful they've been, what does it look like for participation, what other factors within the community might impact the ability to be competitive in a particular activity, and also then why it would make sense for this particular team to play at a lower enrollment class. And so again, all of these resources can be found on the competitive section piece within the dashboard. Make sure that you're taking a look at that. Please call us here at the office if you have questions. Right now, we're kind of in a waiting time for you as we have appeals that have come in. We're putting those into rubrics and creating scoring modules for those, and then working through that through next week. Again, you will see those classification numbers for all activities later today through the MSHSL update. So Charlie and or Laura, it's been a lot of information. The things that I missed or that you'd want to emphasize?
Eric, I think one question that we've been getting and really started during the pandemic is what happens if breakfast and lunch are provided for all students at no cost? Maybe just a quick touch on kind of internally some of our thinking around that question, which seems to be being asked a lot by our coaches and ADs.
Yeah, great point, Charlie. And I've heard it a number of places as well. And so I think when we get to that direct certification, as long as there continue to be programs that will identify students and families who are provided additional assistance, and that direct certification, that link between their qualification and a MARS data piece will assist us as we go forward. We also know that the funding for our schools through compensatory aid is based on these kinds of metrics as well. Should we move away from a phrase of free and reduced lunch to something different, I believe that's going to impact all of the educational community, not just the high school league here. But I think right now that direct certification really, and I just wanted to show that 90% of our students who are available for free and reduced are identified through that process. That's a pretty solid number for us and is relatively consistent. You will also recognize that I use the term team an awful lot when it comes to classification. Just remember that co-ops are classified as a team. And so when we do that, we use the data for all of the schools involved in that co-op to determine, do they meet 50% of the free and reduced? Where are they at when it comes to that for being able to appeal? And so the reason we use team is because we have a growing number of co-ops in many of our sports and activities. So.
And I would jump in just a reminder of where you're finding resources and what's available now and coming. From that page on your dashboard, you should see that updated timeline, which again, will talk you through the next month or so of this process. You should see the page that has your school enrollment on and know that enrollment. The page that has the cutoff lines, again, right now has just those that were appealable. That will be updated later today. It'll be preceded by the update that comes out to you. So you can expect that later today to see the update hit you. And then when you come back into this page, again, you will see those cutoffs for all sports and activities, not just those that are appealable.
Thanks, Laura. You'll also hear a little bit more about district football through the quick takes. But for now, let's move forward to the next slide. And I believe that Charlie is going to talk a little bit about spring season.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And it is the start of our spring season, as you mentioned at the outset of today's lead meeting. Starting this week in a number of our schools, we're synchronized swim, adapted softball, badminton, and Monday we'll usher in the start of track and field, softball, and baseball arm conditioning week. ADs, just a reminder, if your baseball coaches are dropping batting cages or bringing bats out next week, they are in violation of the spirit, intent, and rules for the baseball conditioning period. Just make sure you're having those conversations and that what is being planned for next week fits that rule and policy in baseball. Spring sports start up. Just want to remind ADs to remain diligent in supporting student eligibility so there are no surprises for you, your coaches, your students, their families at any point during the season, particularly the postseason when those surprises can be the most painful. Work with your assistants and coaches to identify any transfer students that may be participating for the first time this school year. Know where they're coming from, know their date of enrollment. Were they participating in any programs and activities at their previous school at any point during this school and athletic year? Physicals on file. Are students making satisfactory progress towards graduation? As the administrator responsible for administering student eligibility in your school, it's important to be committed to doing this part of the job responsibility as well. Also, work with spring coaches to ensure they're completing their general rules and sports-specific rules modules, as well as the concussion module and the CER if they haven't already done so. A reminder that High School League Board policy requires these components to be completed prior to your first contest. Again, we don't want to wait till postseason starts. Now is the time to be checking and making sure that coaches are getting these items completed so that they are meeting the requirements set forth not only from the Minnesota State High School League, but also those required from the state of Minnesota. Be thinking about emergency action plans and how coaches are likely going to need to create multiples as spring coaches. First, many are inside for March and often a significant chunk of April before they move to their outdoor venues. So make sure they're prepared for each location that they may be occupying or practicing within. Whether it's your high school campus, whether it's moving outside to a city or municipal ball field, or a different school building within your campus. Emergency response information is going to be different wherever those teams are going to be. So just be sure that coaches are prepared for those multiple sites as they are being used throughout the season. ADs, please refer to and review bylaw 411, scheduling of contests. That's page 72 to 74 on the handbook. Note that there are clear guidelines for scrimmages and how to conduct them in a way that's compliant with this bylaw. If you are seeking clarification or have questions, please reach out to us here at the league. and do so by reaching out to the staff members that are responsible for the sport in which you are seeking clarification or where there is confusion. We will assist and serve you most efficiently if that's how you reach out to us. We do have language for time trials and track and field, for example, posted for coaches on the dashboard, but we are here to assist in helping you administer bylaw 411. And then finally, during the spring season, we see a significant increase in the number of schools that use ineligible officials during varsity contests. Officials play an important role in the successful completion of our contests and our seasons. Eligible officials meet training requirements, they pass rules exams, they have background checks completed, and they've likely officiated a large number of contests in more than one sport. These folks are a great resource in assisting you to successfully manage contests and events. So comply with bylaw 413, ensure your greatest chance for high quality contests by using those eligible officials. With that, I believe, well, I'll turn it back to Eric, maybe if there's anything I missed, and we're going to move into quick takes and our checklist.
Thanks, Charlie, and just lots of good reminders there. We recognize that the week right before a sport starts and the first week of it is likely the most busy, and these are piling up in the spring season. Don't take things for granted. Double check those eligibility pieces on all sides, coaches, officials, and participants. Again, appreciate all of your leadership, and we're not sure when we're going to be outside to any great extent, but we know that we're going to be awful busy inside right now. So good luck to everybody on that front. Take a quick look at some information from the foundation. So again, the State High School League Foundation is funded by state tax dollars off of both section and state tournament tickets. Annually, we see between $900,000 and $1 million that go into this foundation and come back to schools. Earlier in Form A, we sent back $700,000 to our member schools. In the work this week, our foundation board of directors approved over $6,000, as you can see in the Form B1 grants. Those were transportation needs heading to Together We Make a Difference. Secondarily, they looked at the Form B2 grants and approved over $230,000 there. What we recognize is because of the absence of Form B grants over the last few years, and with transitions within our activities directors, et cetera, we need to do a better job of explaining, giving clear examples of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate under Form B, and also the clear requirements that need to be there. So we did have some that we were not able to approve, but we will be communicating back in the next week from the High School League office as to the progress of your particular grant request, and also then looking to fund those out to you either the last week of March or the first week of April. So those dollars will be coming very soon. Again, the focused areas are access for students to high school league programming, health and safety, leadership, and also a level of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for adults, trainings, et cetera, that might lead in those directions. When it comes to our students, we again talk about leadership, safe participation, and those aspects of DEIB, where we can all as a school community be more effective, more inclusive, and support one another as we go forward. So look for more information on that coming if you did apply. Our next two slides include information that you're going to need to pay attention to. So I'm going to turn it to Lisa Quidnow for information from Quick Takes and the checklist.
Thank you, Eric. And as we move through completion of our time together today, Quick Takes is a good reminder of some things to be on the lookout and remember. District football placement timeline. This will be happening in April as the football placement committee works to meet and assign schools during that time. And after that takes place in May, district committees will work to create those district football schedules. And so please make sure you are aware of those and talking with the correct people. Tucker Center Women's Coaching Symposium. This is a great opportunity on April 21st for female coaches and those who coach females to engage in some professional development and networking in a fairly local environment. It will be at the University of Minnesota. And the Tucker Center is a fantastic resource that we have. There is a link to the registration that I would encourage you to share with your female administrators, your female coaches, or those who coach females. And they are offering a great symposium this year for those folks. And another reminder, summer coaching waiver, as you're working with your winter coaches to wrap up the end of their season, this is a good time to get that taken off the list and make sure that they are completing the summer coaching waiver. And that will be on their coach's dashboard. So those are the quick takes. And then just a checklist reminder, this is always a good resource to come back to after the end of our time together today for some things that we've highlighted and talked about. Spring coaches, ensure that those coaches are doing the appropriate CERs that are needed. Make sure that they are getting their concussion, general coaches meeting and sports specific meetings done. Make sure that your head coaches are all head coach certified. Confirming again, as Eric mentioned, that those spring athlete eligibility is in place and that you have talked to any new students who might be new to your programs this spring. As we are wrapping up winter, make sure you are completing those winter participation numbers, record them and document them, as you will be asked to report them at a later date this spring. Of course, we have a great partnership with the MSHSL, and those of you who are registered, we know that there's great programming prepared for you. And if you still haven't registered, there is time to register for the AD meeting in March. And also a reminder that your assistants are able to go to that, and there are programming times for them as well. And then just note that the competitive section activity cutoff list will be coming out in an update later today. So make sure you're reviewing those. At this time, I'll turn it back to Eric.
Sounds great, Lisa. I appreciate that. And the training with the Tucker Center, I think, is a great one, and connected to International Women's Day, celebrated here on March 8th. I think that's just a great piece as we continue to think about our opportunities for females within our programs, and especially those who lead in that particular space, both our female leaders as well as male leaders who are supporting our female activities in athletics. So we appreciate everyone's time. Recognize we might be a minute over. Bob would not be proud of that. We apologize for that one extra minute. I would say thank you to our lead liaisons for helping us set up the data and the information that we discuss here on LEAD. And again, a special thanks to all of you for the work that you do in our postseasons, whether it's at the section or the state tournament. We rely an awful lot on EDs in all situations. But for us, we see them directly at a lot of our state tournaments, supporting the management of the tournaments, as well as the teams, the bands, the media, and so on. And so thanks to all of you. We do it together, and we're looking for a great last 3 weekends here as we wrap up the winter. And best to all of you as you kick off your spring seasons in your schools this week or next week. Stay well, everyone. Thank you.